Stan just got a new job, and like a lot of losers who enjoy D&D, Stan has no friends. Stan ends up befriending a guy who works for the IT department, Rob. They talk about tabletop RPGs, specifically this character that Rob wanted to play for a D&D campaign that never got off the ground, called Iron Man. Stan is just happy that he was able to make a friend, so he offers to run a solo game of D&D so Rob would be able to play this Iron Man character that he has. So during lunch, anytime they have downtime, they play this impromptu game of D&D. All these sort of in-between games that Stan is running is tailor-made to flesh out the character of Iron Man that Rob made. These impromptu games start to get the attention of the other co-workers who ask about the game of D&D during work. Stan tells them that it's a pretty good time, and he starts thinking of putting a group together maybe. Only problem is schedules aren't really lining up, so what Stan does is he just runs individual games for whoever's interested to flesh out whatever characters that they come up with. The first guy is a dude named Edward who's a theater major, and he's doing a performance of Jekyll and Hyde, and so he makes a character that's basically just Jekyll and Hyde. And then after Stan runs games for him, he quits, and then he moves away, and then he never joins them again. I'm just reporting the facts here. After Edward leaves, his character just becomes an NPC in the world. But then after that, Rob's friend, Scarlett, joins in on the D&D games that Rob is playing in, and she joins in as like a expert assassin who's meant to be spying on Rob's character. There are also the two Chris's. The two Chris's are friends who met before they started working together because they're both history majors that go to the same college, and they are both interested in this weird dice game that Stan is running. The first Chris is really into mythology and doesn't really understand how power balancing works, and so all he wants to be is Thor, like the god of thunder Thor. However, Stan has time to think about this in between shifts, and he decides that maybe having an actual god of thunder is workable if I just take away all of his powers and have him, as he's leveling up, regaining all of his godly powers. Stan knows that Chris probably wouldn't have fun playing like an all-powerful Thunder Viking, and so he has Chris play a Thunder Viking with a normal amount of power and then work his way up to being an all-powerful Thunder Viking. Stan pitches the idea to Chris, who's like, do I still get to have the hammer? And Stan is like, yeah, eventually. Chris is like, yeah, cool. Sounds good. For sure. The other Chris is also really into history, but like World War II history, and he really wants to play like a Warhammer super soldier who also fights in World War II. Stan is somewhat concerned that Chris may be a little too into all that World War II stuff. Stan cuts out all the Nazi stuff. He has him instead fight these high-tech super secret society that's trying to destroy the world. It works. It functions. Stan is also thinking of ways of how he can combine all of these characters into one shared campaign because he wants to take all of his friends and put them all into the same little group. The only thing is everyone else is existing in the same time frame except for this one guy in World War II. And then in the next session, Captain America kind of beefs it, and then Stan decides maybe instead he's just like frozen and then he's de-thawed into the future, and then boom, timelines converged. Keep in mind, this whole time Stan is running these games during his lunch breaks and whenever they have downtime at work. He just kind of hides a D20 in his pocket and rolls it whenever he needs to. It's either that or they would play by text, where if they wanted to do something that was a little too trivial to do in person, they would just text Stan, and then Stan would be like, noted. Stan has been patient playing all these solo campaigns, fleshing out all these characters. He wants the payoff, alright? He wants the team up. The only thing he has to get around is all these scheduling conflicts. Loki stealing the Tesseract is actually pretty genius as a motivating, inciting incident. Loki is Thor's rival, so Thor has a reason to want to stop Loki. Loki is using the Tesseract, and the Tesseract is something that Captain America had encountered and definitely wants to be destroyed. And also Iron Man wants to study the Tesseract because he's all into like that clean energy stuff, and the Tesseract is like an infinite source of energy. And then you got Black Widow, who has to persuade Bruce Banner to track down the Tesseract with like the gamma radiation and stuff like that. Black Widow's motivation is pretty weak, but she's working for S.H.I.E.L.D. She kind of has to do all of this. And yes, Black Widow is a player character, Hulk is an NPC. Keep up. It makes sense. Just think about it. I don't want to see any comments. If you're going to comment, you better be agreeing with me. If you are disagreeing with me, you are wrong. Stan has taken these different character motivations, has tied them all together, and used this S.H.I.E.L.D. agency as sort of the glue, and then the Loki as the inciting incident, and now he's about ready to start scheduling some actual games. Thor cannot make it to the first session, so the first session is Cap.
You know, the last time I was in Germany, in saw a man standing above everybody else. We ended up disagreeing.
Iron Man. Black Widow. Fighting Loki at the Opera House of Germany. Session 2 is with Thor, but with Black Widow being late, which is why in the beginning she's just sort of piloting the ship. Maybe she is there and she's just kind of bored and she just wants to pilot the ship. Like, she doesn't want to get involved in any of this. That's also entirely possible. Thor's player doesn't fully grasp that this is like a team game, and he also completely thinks that his character is more powerful than everyone else, so he just kind of fights them to try to take Loki. He soon finds out that all the players are the same level as him, and they can easily take him. And then once Thor realizes this, and also Captain America joins in, and he's obviously, on Iron Man's side, he's like, okay, yeah, how about we team up? That sounds like a good idea. Like, a team, let's team up together, that sounds good. Not every single D&D player fully grasps that it's a team game. I feel like that would be Thor. I feel like Thor would start out with being like, I'll fight everyone, and then, like, lose. The other half of the session would just be introducing the helicarrier, role-playing with the different NPCs, and just sort of establishing S.H.I.E.L.D. as an organization and what resources they can provide. However, in between sessions, Rob is thinking about the campaign. He's thinking like, I don't think my character would fully trust this shadowy government organization, and so he thinks about ways that he can sort of dig in to like the information areas, try to get as much info on like the intentions of S.H.I.E.L.D. as possible, and what this ends up doing is sparking a bunch of debate at the table. The first half of session 3 is just the players arguing with each other, and occasionally the DM kind of butting in to also kind of throw in some arguments. The session is looking like it is really going downhill, and so Stan decides, okay, you know what? I'm going to throw in a Loki breakout mission. I was going to do it later, but I'm just going to do it now because everyone's arguing with each other and I need to distract them with combat. Everyone seems like they were itching for some combat, but they didn't realize to what extent the chaos of the combat would be. Everyone's split up. Black Widow is running away from the Hulk. Cap and Iron Man are trying to keep the helicarrier up. Thor's having the time of his life fighting with Hulk. Loki does get away, though. It is a devastating loss, but what it does is it lets the team kind of come together for that common goal that they desperately needed. And this transitions us into session 4, which is the battle for New York. The battle for New York is mostly combat, which is also broken up by different skill challenges. It begins with distracting Loki, and then he opens up the portal, but then after that, it's fighting in the streets, and then Stan rolling for different events to happen in the battle. He has a little table behind the screen, and whenever he wants to mix things up, he rolls on the table and a random event happens. These events are like a massive monster coming through the portal, and like the players have to learn how to defeat it, or the aliens take a building of citizens hostage, and the players have this objective that they have to complete. The reason for this like event table is to break up the battle, so it's not just a slog. It's a bunch of these little mini objectives that the players can complete that sort of act as checkpoints, signs of progression of how the battle's going. This is in order to avoid a monotonous slog of killing goon after goon, alien after alien. All the characters in the Avengers are built for combat, except for Black Widow. Black Widow is not having that good of a time. She's a rogue, she's an assassin, she's not really meant for killing enemy after enemy. She's the only one who's having a hard time doing a bunch of like consistently good damage without help from the rest of the team. She also seems to be the only person who is concerned with the onslaught of aliens pouring through that portal with no end in sight. She's the only person thinking like, hey, maybe someone should do something about that. So in between her turns in combat, she's thinking like, how am I going to be able to close that portal? And eventually she decides to just skip the streets in New York and just go right to the portal room to try to close it. While she's doing that, Stan rolls for another event. And it's the nuke event. Yeah, the players are really panicking. There is a nuclear bomb heading straight for New York City. Rob, being the only character who can consistently fly, is trying to stop the missile from detonating in New York City. He's grabbing onto the missile. Black Widow has made it to the portal room. She's getting ready to close it, and she has to do this like one skill challenge with the staff. Scepter. It's a scepter. I don't care enough to correct myself. Rob is panicking. Where am I going to put this nuke? What am I going to do with this nuke? And then he thinks, the portal. I'll send it through the portal. And he flies over to the portal right before Black Widow is able to close it, sends the missile straight into the portal, detonates the aliens, and also drops to 0 HP. Stan really wants this battle to be over. It's just been fighting. They haven't been able to close the portal, so he decides, you know what? Sure, the nuke just incapacitates all the aliens. Sure. Not only did Rob drop to 0 HP, but he also is dropping through the stratosphere. Rob is failing death save after death save. When he hits the ground, no one has any healing left. Certainly no one is trained in medicine, and so they just have to see what Rob rolls. Then he gets a natural 20. The man who started it all, he lives. For now. That was the end of, the Avengers. As people walk away from the session after Loki gets sent to God jail, all the players walk away thinking the same thing. We should really do that again. This is what we call a West Marches campaign. A West Marches campaign is players who meet up asynchronously. They go off on their own adventures and then come back to sort of join the rest of the group. I love West Marches campaigns. It makes my games feel like the players are choosing what they really want to do. I like how the characters are able to develop outside of the story. So if the story isn't really fitting to the character, they can develop outside of it. This is how I'm going to be running my Patreon exclusive D&D campaign. Everyone who is part of my Patreon has access to this D&D campaign, and this is how I want to run it. I want to run it where people make their characters outside of the story, and then the story is tailored to them. You should also definitely join that Patreon campaign. We're starting to run games now, and it's pretty fun. I'm having a good time writing the games. Also, buy merch. I never mentioned my merch. I have a what's it called? I have a Teespring. The prices are lower than the average that Teespring recommends, and I think the designs are pretty neat. Just buy a shirt. Come on. $20? Just buy a shirt. You should subscribe. That would be really cool of you if you did subscribe. And watch another video. I'm going to put another video on the screen right here. There's another video right here. And you should watch that video. Oh yeah. You haven't clicked on the video yet, so it's right there. That was a good one. I liked making that one, and I think it turned out really well.